Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2013 State of the University address. We're pleased to have you here, and I want to recognize Paige Holland, who is with us today. It's always a pleasure to have her. I've been asked to introduce the President. This is my third year doing so, and I'm rather surprised I was asked to do it again. The last 2 years I took this assignment seriously and tried to set a respectful and reverential tone in my introduction, only to find myself the recipient of several barbs and jokes from the President. I would have thought that he would not want to risk asking me again to introduce him a third time, but as you see, this is not the case. I've thought long and hard about this assignment and how I might take advantage of this opportunity that has been given me. After careful consideration and reflection on my heritage as a polite and civil Canadian, I've decided to take the high ground on this matter and turn the other cheek. In fact, the other day, I heard the President say to Norm Wright, "In business, it's dog eat dog. In academia, it's just the reverse." Taking that to heart, I thought I'd best restrain myself. However, speaking of deans, I was in the President's office last week, and Candace received a phone call. The President asked her who was on the phone, and she said a woman called requesting a speaker for a luncheon meeting. The woman said, I want nothing lower than a dean. To which the President responded, "Candace, there is nothing lower than a dean." Needless to say, I was shocked by that. I just want you to know that the President takes these annual State of the University addresses very seriously. You can imagine it's a rather daunting task. He is so focused that, in fact, his children have a hard time getting his attention. I think that Gracie will be glad when this is all over with and she can talk to her dad. Being a university president is certainly not easy. Someone once said that running a university is like running a cemetery. You have a lot of people under you and nobody is listening. All kidding aside, this is really a wonderful opportunity each year to get together as a university body and to hear from our President. These are challenging times, certainly. However, I want you to know that there is no one I would rather have at the helm of UVU to help us navigate through these rough seas than President Matthew Holland. He loves UVU. He is committed to its success. He has a good grasp of the challenges that we are facing and a vision for how we can see them through. He's an optimist. During difficult times, Winston Churchill remarked, "It is an hour not for despair, but for courage and rebuilding, and that is the spirit which should rule us in this hour." Such is the enthusiasm and optimism of our President. Please join me in welcoming President Matthew Holland.
Excuse me for just a minute. Candace, could you pull Ian's personnel file for me, please? I'd like that on my desk as soon as I get back. You know, I go after you. The comedy club called. They were asking for your wife. So. Well, it's role reversal. I was just going to be so nice today. And I will be nice. I'll just say one thing. We are so fortunate to have Dr. Ian Wilson. Every university should have an academic vice president who has moves like Jagger. Well, I've got a lot of ground to cover today, and I want to launch right into it. So good afternoon. I welcome all of you today, students, staff, faculty, members of our governing boards, community members, civic leaders. We appreciate your participation with us today, and also extend a warm note of welcome to those who are watching online. As always, it remains a truly inspirational sight to look out and see you, to see so many people who are so different in so many ways, but who are all here today unified in a single sterling cause, providing higher education to one of the largest collections of students in the land. As I survey this audience and consider the many more watching online, I am awash with pride to be part of such an intelligent, creative, hardworking body dedicated to the educational enterprise. At this point, despite what he's just said, I'm tempted to have Dr. Wilson come back up to verify that I have goosebumps running up my spine, but that would simply be awkward for everybody, especially those with proper Canadian sympathy. But they are there, and rightly so. As some of you know, I'm spending a little time lately these days with Benjamin Franklin. This is not courtesy of Teresa Caputo, Long Island medium. When it comes to reality TV, I confess my taste trend in the direction of dance moms. Rather, this is courtesy of good old-fashioned scholarship. Though it's not my chief responsibility, I do believe that in order to do my job the very best that I can, I need to stay somewhat active in the realms of teaching and research. To this end, I taught an honors section of ethics and values with Elaine Engelhardt this last semester. And this semester, a university press is publishing a volume of essays I edited on the intellectual world and outlook of Benjamin Franklin. One of the brightest and most complex and intriguing of the founding fathers, there is much to learn from this man. Among his many pearls of wisdom is the sentiment that an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Although a fairly sound economist for his day, I do not believe Dr. Franklin's assessment here is a purely financial one. Rather, he, like so many of you, understood the massive social, emotional, physical, psychological, even spiritual, as well as financial benefits of acquiring, expanding, and transferring knowledge. Certainly that is my own view about the full merits of working in the field of higher education. From a strictly civic perspective, I do not think there is a more important work in which we could be engaged. But the source of my pride is not just that one way or another, from the faculty in the classroom to the work crews on the grounds, we are all laboring together in this critical enterprise of educating. My pride also stems from the fact that we are doing it here at UVU and doing it the UVU way. Every single day that I have been on this campus, I have been moved by you, by your dedicated service, your clever insights, your creative efficiencies, your concern for students, your respect for each other, by your optimism, your innovation, and your generosity. We are not a perfect lot for sure, as Ian demonstrated. Candidly speaking, there is room for improvement everywhere. But in terms of the general atmosphere here, I would stack up UVU's can-do, collegial spirit of commitment to the success of students in the pursuit of knowledge with any other institution of higher learning that I know. I mean that. And so, on behalf of grateful students and a grateful community that does not really have a regular vehicle for doing so, I thank you for what you do. You, at least most of you, are laboring diligently, day in and day out, in a way that collectively is making an extraordinary difference in the strength of our academic programs, the safety, efficiency, and beauty of our campuses, and the quality of our overall employee and student experiences. For all of this, you are most deserving of more thanks than you tend to receive, and you are the source of this incredible pride I feel in being your colleague. This is the first and most vital message I wish to convey this afternoon. Now, all of that said, I believe I would err today if all that I shared with you is unbridled enthusiasm. Education in general, and UVU in particular, are not without some very real challenges at the moment. There is right now a complex swirl of political, economic, and institutional forces at work putting additional strain on our already strained campus. Such complexity and pressure requires a very deliberate attention to the pushes and pulls of planning and adapting, of pursuing a strategic revision revised as necessary by the ever-shifting ground of context. Perhaps Kathy Debenham puts it best with her oft-repeated aphorism, striving for the ideal, but dealing with the real. The inevitable tension between thoughtful aspiration and practical realization stands at the heart of my remarks, because that tension is for me particularly acute these days. Even as I find myself deeply sobered by some immediate hurdles we face, I have never been more excited about UVU's future or been better able to envision a clear path to our best ambitions. My hope this afternoon is to treat both sides of this equation candidly and realistically. Doing so requires that I go into a bit more detail on matters I would generally tackle more broadly and briefly. Truly, apologies in advance if this gets a little bit laborious. But I believe you deserve a careful treatment of the particulars of our situation. It is my hope that a more transparent treatment of the forces and opportunities facing us will produce the mix of bracing realism and well-warranted optimism called for at this peculiar moment in the development of Utah Valley University. To do this, I will speak of the institutions now and the next 8 years. We'll start with the now. As you know, UVU has recently experienced several semesters of enrollment decline. Last summer, we dropped nearly 9% in enrollment, primarily due to a change in the federal regulations governing Pell Grant usage. This last fall, we dropped 2.8%. We suspect some of this was due to a ripening economy that gave more of our students opportunities to work. We also know that some of this decline was due to the various changes we made to our admissions and enrollment policies, including an earlier admissions deadline, an earlier purge of students who had not paid tuition but were holding vital waitlisted seats, and most significantly, implementation of structured enrollment. As far as the dip due to our enrollment policy changes, we saw it coming and planned for it. Furthermore, we are already seeing signs that these policies are having their intended effect, that even as we continue our inclusive mission of access and open admissions institution, our students are entering on a more serious footing. They are better prepared for the rigors of higher education, and we are better organized to assist those who are willing to stay on their path to scholastic success. Just look at the following bar chart comparing enrollment trends between the start and end of term for fall of this year and fall of the year before. A year and a half ago, our beginning enrollments dipped by roughly 2.5% by end of term. This pattern of falling enrollments between beginning and end of term is something we have followed virtually every year of our existence. Now, see what happened last fall. Our enrollments were down overall beginning of term, but our end of term enrollment in both headcount and FTE actually exceeded our start of term enrollment. As a result, the budget hit from this fall's enrollment decline was more modest than it otherwise would have appeared. By the way, the immediate success of this effort is already being recognized nationally, with leading observers of higher education like David Gardner, Vincent Tinto, and Robert Dixon, all praising our concrete efforts to embrace our unique educational mission and university-style quality with community college-style access. And state leaders are taking note. This program has been singled out for presentation to the Higher Ed Appropriations Committee, which I will give this Friday. I take a moment here to give great credit and thanks to all those individuals across so many divisions and areas that have worked with patience and determination to make this a reality. Now, in terms of the enrollment dip this spring, I wish I could be as rosy. New and quite unexpected developments have taken our modest fall decline in enrollment and expanded it quite significantly. This past October, leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced that the age of missionary service eligibility for men and women would change immediately. For those who may not be familiar with LDS practices, this means that young men can now begin missionary service at age 18 instead of 19, and young women can begin at 19 instead of 21. It is no secret that an exceptionally large portion of our student and community demographics self-identify as believers of the LDS faith. For this community, such an announcement is an historic and exciting change that has more than quadrupled the total number of missionary applications, with the largest increase coming from women. Undoubtedly, there are people in this room and across this university that feel they have been or will be directly and positively affected by this. To them, we extend a heartfelt congratulations. Even as all of us note, and many of us share in, the celebratory nature of this change for so many in our community, and even as we anticipate some distinctive benefits associated with young students coming back and starting their academic career on a more mature and disciplined plane, we note that this change is already presenting some very significant short-term challenges for us. You may have heard that UVU is facing an enrollment decline this spring of 9%. That is not entirely accurate. Spring third week total headcount is down 6.8% compared to third week spring of 2012. However, given the dynamics of our new admissions and enrollment policies, as just explained, a more accurate comparison is found in examining end-of-semester counts, which are more likely to show a 5% decrease. As near as we can tell, roughly half of this drop came as expected from our changed policies and the improving economy. The other half, we estimate, is the impact of the missionary age change. Given how heavily weighted towards tuition our budget has become over the years, student enrollment declines directly affect UVU's revenue and bottom line. This combination of decreases in enrollment last summer, last fall, and this spring translates to a revenue decrease of approximately $5.3 million. Last time I checked, that's real money. Fortunately, because of the smart stewardship of our financial resources, and here I give tremendous appreciation to the Prudential Council and thoughtful operation of the Planning and Budget Office, as well as the finance arm of the institution, falling under Linda Macon and Val Peterson, respectively. We are absorbing this major financial hit in the current year with little to no disruption of ongoing services and support. As you may have noticed, during this time of immediate revenue loss, we have called for no special spending restrictions, nor have we asked departments to reduce budgets. We have continued apace with various replacement cycles, purchasing, and virtually all projects that were already underway or even in the planning process. The one big exception to all this is that we have instituted a hiring chill. The metaphor here is chosen carefully. This is not a hiring freeze where all positions remain as is, filled or not filled. In the last few months of the chill, we have continued to hire and fill many positions. However, every position before being filled is carefully reviewed by the corresponding vice president, the budget office, human resources, and myself. In a number of cases, we have asked the hiring agent to hold on filling the position or making the offer. Our purpose in doing so is not so much to navigate the challenges of our current budget year challenge. Rather, it is to take precautionary steps for the uncertainty that lies ahead. From virtually the very moment the missionary age change was announced, we and most other institutions in the system have been furiously trying to project enrollment impact. We know what is happening to us now, spring semester. Looking toward the future, our best estimates, based on every possible piece of available data and a collaborative, iterative process of analysis with leaders across this campus, the Utah system of higher education, and the LDS Church, suggest that UVU could experience anywhere from a 4 to 7% enrollment decline in fall of 2013. This would translate to an additional budget hit in the range of $2.3 to $4.7 million. Combined with what happened last summer, last fall, and last fall, our total revenue loss from recent and future enrollment changes through the academic year 2013-14 would be somewhere between $7.6 to $10 million ongoing. Will we experience further enrollment decline after that? Probably, but more to the tune of 1.5% to 2.5% in the academic year 2014-15, with things starting to smooth out in 15-16 and the wave completed by 16-17. So for now, the major and most concrete challenge rising before us is that roughly $7 to $10 million shortfall that will be in effect next year. And unfortunately, this is not all we are facing. Those already lunging for the oxygen, hold on. More bad news is on the way. While UVU and other Utah schools are facing unique state issues, there are a number of national issues affecting schools everywhere. More uncertainty remains in our nation's capital. Sequestration still looms as a threat on the federal budget level. The Pell Grant is protected from sequester cuts through October, but other federal student aid programs would likely be cut, which would further exacerbate our enrollment issues. More significantly, cuts to hundreds of federally funded programs putting pressure on the state to plug the gaps would further erode the state's limited capacity to fund education. But the problem goes even deeper than that. Since 1/3 of the state budget is supported by federal funding, sequestration would create a massive shortfall for many existing state programs. Already there is talk at the Utah State Capitol of calling a special session to deal with the sequestration scenario should it materialize after the end of the regular legislative session. Additionally, employees all across the country are grappling with the implementation of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, PPACA, as the employer mandate portion of the law begins to take effect. To put all of our part-time employees on full-time benefits, as some have suggested we do in the spirit of the PPACA, would require tens of millions of additional ongoing revenue. This is simply a non-starter for Utah Valley University. Consequently, we must hold to strict limits on hours for our part-time employees. For some time now, and even as we speak, the IRS has been busy writing and releasing guidelines and rules concerning such work limits. Since our mid-December announcement of the new work limits at UVU, the IRS has released additional directives, and we are told is likely to release even more rulings this spring. This incoming information is being reviewed regularly by UVU's benefits consultant, Human Resources, Academic Affairs, and Planning and Budget. Within the month, President's Council will consider further revisions to the work limits policy, especially as it relates to adjunct faculty. Well, as if all of that is not enough, I have one more bit of bad news. You're going to think I'm making this up, but I'm not. Just this very week, federal wildlife officials recommended that wolverines be officially designated an endangered species. That is true. Down to a population of less than 300 in the contiguous 48 states, the species' very existence is in jeopardy by the increasing declines of deep mountain snows due to global warming. Is it just me, or does it seem like every force in and out around the world is out to get UVU? I mean, really, wolverine extinction this week? Are you kidding me? It's enough to drive a man, at least this man, to ask for the Diet Mountain Dew that has caffeine. What else could possibly go wrong? I mean, the next thing you'll tell me is that Mike Jacobson is stepping down after 29 years of successful service. Oh, wait, that's happening too. Pass the beer nuts with that caffeinated Mountain Dew. It's moments like this that I can't help but think of that classic Gene Kerr reformulation of Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head about you when all about you are losing theirs, it's likely you haven't grasped the situation. Well, Our situation is actually quite serious, and I hope that what I've shared helps you grasp that. But it's not time to lose our heads. It's not even time to hang our heads. Why? Not because we can make our short-term problems go away. We cannot. But there are steps we can take to mitigate against them. And in the long term, and maybe even in the medium term, our prospects look as promising as ever. In terms of dealing with our challenges in the now, let me offer a few thoughts. I will take them in reverse order. To those facing the brunt of the PPACA changes, please know how much we value our part-time staff and adjunct faculty. You make an absolutely essential and invaluable contribution to the success of this university, and we are working as hard as we possibly can to maximize your available hours of work. As far as adjuncts go, I will also note that right now there is in a committee working in the Faculty Senate to address other ways we can bring additional support to our part-time faculty. I will say something about compensation more generally for faculty and full-time staff, and for full-time and part-time staff in just a moment. But here, as far as adjunct compensation goes, I affirm a continuing commitment to a multi-year initiative to raise adjunct pay substantially, bringing it more in line with rates commensurate for a school of our size and mission. In the last 3 years, this has meant a 26% increase in adjunct rates compared to a 1% raise for the rest of campus. More needs to be done, but it remains a priority, and as I will explain, there's reason to believe that we might make some progress on compensation issues more generally, despite the ominous forces I have just been discussing. With respect to the fiscal cliff scenarios still possible due to Washington's gridlock, there is not much I can say. If some of the worst-case scenarios set in, everyone in and out of education and all around the country is in deep trouble. All we can do at this point is trust that such outcomes would be so bad for so many that our leaders will somehow find a fruitful way to avoid this fate. If not, we will hardly be alone in reconsidering how we will do business moving forward. I think the most constructive thing we can focus on today is what can and needs to be done in the face of our enrollment decline and subsequent budget shortfall. First, we are significantly increasing our marketing and student recruiting efforts. The aim here is twofold. At one level, we must get out the word that any students departing for missions right out of high school who are even thinking about college should apply to UVU before they leave. Thanks to the enlightened planning and energetic efforts of our friends over in Corey Duckworth's excellent student affairs shop, with a special nod here to AVP Michelle Taylor, our Student Success and Retention Director Michelle Kearns, and our Leave of Absence Counselor Kim Bearclough. Supported by our crack IT staff, we have unquestionably the most advanced and sophisticated deferred admissions and leave of absence program of any institution in the state. A student who applies now will be set up to keep scholarships as well as lines of coordination open for the easiest of reentries. Given that it will be increasingly hard to market and recruit to first-time students returning from missions all around the world at all times of year, it is essential to get as many of these students as possible into the UVU system before they leave. As a result, we are putting additional resources into targeted mailings and other vehicles to get the word out to students and parents about just how easy it is to set up a deferred admission and to hold a scholarship. You will no doubt have noticed a significant boost in our internal messaging to current students about the leave of absence program for students leaving temporarily for whatever reason, be that mission, military, pregnancy, or medical challenge. Of course, it's vital to remember in all of this that UVU is dedicated to being an inclusive institution, home to students from all walks of life, many of whom are not LDS. And even a fair number of those who are will not choose to serve a mission. Our efforts at reaching out more aggressively to all of these students must also form the other area of focus of our recruiting efforts. We have already made some early PBA decisions to support additional open houses and recruiting activities to attract students from all across the state who are ready to start immediately. Additionally, we are beefing up our out-of-state and international recruitment, as well as our effort of finding and encouraging non-traditional students to come back and finish a degree. A related strategy is increasing the number of courses offered on the block schedule. This would allow different entry and exit points for students who might delay or otherwise skip out on coming because the timetable of the traditional semester does not work for them. I commend Vice President Wilson and other academic leaders who have scrambled to create a few more options for students to enroll in the second block of this semester. Given that the demand for such appears to be even greater than expected, especially among those who've indicated they could not otherwise attend in the short run, I ask other faculty and department leaders to work with the central administration on providing additional block classes this semester, if possible. One of the things I love about these particular initiatives, they are things we probably should have been doing anyway. In the past seasons of record student growth, it was hard to justify internally and externally why we would be spending on aggressive marketing approaches when we barely had room to keep up with students coming through the door anyway. That said, I think many are now finally recognizing that the active spreading of the message of higher education opportunities at UVU needs to be a constant and vigorous effort, especially if we are to reach Utah's big goal of 66% of adult Utahns with some higher education certificate or degree by the year 2020. Currently, we are starting to lose market share to many for-profit outfits that have just the opposite model of ours. Their model often being that of oodles of money poured into glitzy ads and gimmicky recruiting tactics with a much smaller share of their budget devoted directly to student support for a high-quality, well-rounded learning experience. For too long, we have held back we have held back too much in our efforts to help students see that the path of public higher education, especially at UVU, where student success and not personal profit or any other ambition stands at the heart of all we do, is a much better return on their educational investment dollar. Changing this will help fill our immediate gap, and it will push us closer to fulfilling our already existing public duty to be a magnet for any student, especially any student in our service region who has the aptitude, need, and will to pursue post-secondary education. The time is here to go find and attract those students. I wish to note that with this reinvigorated commitment to attracting new students, we must hold steadfast in our commitment to our new admissions and enrollment policies. Having paid the price to get the institution on the right plane for enrolling students on a stronger note of preparation and commitment while still protecting avenues of access, we cannot abandon the gains we have made in striking that delicate balance in order to address this immediate exigency. For me, this is nothing less than remaining relentlessly focused on student retention and graduation. Yes, we want more students here, but not more students at any cost. We want them here in a frame of mind and in an atmosphere where they are most likely to flourish and finish. Continuing to hammer away at building a culture of student success will have its own dividends on the other end. While freshman and sophomore enrollments will most likely decline in the next few years, enrollments in junior and senior courses should increase through the continuous and sweeping approach of our retention efforts. Finding additional students is not our only strategy for revenue generation. As of late, Mark Archambault and his team have successfully increased the volume, intensity, and sophistication of our development and alumni relations and are making connections locally across the nation and across the nation that are already bearing fruit and will continue to yield support for UVU in the future. Brian Birch and Curtis Pendleton have worked together across campus to significantly ramp up our success in grant writing, which has seen a substantial rise in generating foundation and agency support for various projects and personnel on campus. Faculty and staff would be well served to get better acquainted with both our development and grant writing operations in order to see what additional monies might be secured in your area. Of course, our main source of revenue, next to tuition, is legislative funding. We are now into our second week of the legislative session, but we have been meeting with legislators regularly for the last 3 months to make the case for UVU's priorities. And even before that, we worked quite successfully, I believe, with the governor and the Board of Regents to see that their budget requests took careful stock of our critical situation. In the coming days, the legislature will consider those budget proposals, which include several requests worth mentioning. First and foremost, there is a request for money for general employee compensation. Just like last year, right at the top of my list is that anything that is done for other state employees should be done for the faculty and staff of UVU, who, after all, are state employees. More on that shortly. Second, there is a request for equity funding, which gives the highest distribution of money to UVU. The fact that such a request is now officially in the regions and the governor's budget is a major step forward and bodes well for us building on the gains we made last year on this front. Third, funding under the category of distinctive mission would give additional money to UVU tied to specific submitted projects key to fulfilling our unique educational role. Fourth, this year there is a special STEM initiative tied to the 2020 goal of 66% of adults with a post-secondary education. There is money here too for UVU. In this case, that money is tied to expanding programs and completions in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. Last, but certainly not least, is our request for a very large classroom building and office building, of which I will discuss at the end of my remarks. The big question in all of this is there any money to fund these requests? As noted, the federal picture clouds things considerably. If that situation goes haywire, hope for much gain here is basically lost. If that gets worked out, the current signals from the state swing between varying degrees of optimism for some money for higher education. For those of you who tuned into Governor Herbert's State of the State address last week, you no doubt heard his discussion of educational priorities, including a call to the legislature to provide additional funding for higher education. Additionally, the state's business community has gotten itself fairly organized and formally organized in the form of the Prosperity 2020 movement. They are bringing tremendous pressure to bear on the legislative community to make sure that education is properly funded, putting the goal of 66% of adults with degrees at the very top of their objectives. I believe that's something of a first for higher ed to be higher in its claim on the objectives of the Salt Lake business community over public ed. My sense is that the legislature is listening and responding, and that our delegation with the speaker in the lead is especially attuned to UVU's needs. But in addition to the federal question, much hinges on the revenue estimates that will be coming shortly. We will keep you posted, and we will keep working every single day to make our case. I'm delighted to report that new Vice President of University Relations, Cameron Martin, has very smoothly glided into his new role as legislative liaison and covered an immense amount of ground in the last few months, facilitating greater legislative attention to UVU's needs. On your way out, you will receive a card he developed summarizing our priorities. The combination of his work with the seasoned and inside efforts of Representative Vice President Val Peterson, supported by the hawk-like observations of Linda Macon, is proving a most effective operation. The one remaining variable in all this is tuition rates. Each year, the Board of Regents determines any changes to what is called first-tier tuition. This applies across the board for all institutions in the Utah system of higher education. Each institution also has an additional opportunity to decide to add to that base and increase what is called second-tier tuition. Given our mission to remain as accessible as possible to students, tuition increases are not our favored option to increase revenue. For instance, last year we were only one of 2 schools that did not raise second-tier tuition. Yet we are charged to maintain an institution with quality services and courses to help our students be successful. So turning to both first and second-tier tuition must always remain on the table as an option. This year, we do not yet know what first-tier tuition increase will be, but we stand ready for a second-tier tuition increase of somewhere between 1% and 5%. Just as we do each year, we will hold a second-tier tuition hearing for students and anyone else who would like to attend. This year. The hearing will be on Tuesday, February 19th, 2 o'clock here at Center Stage, or at Center Stage. At this point, I think you see the situation we face. We are staring down the barrel of a $7 to $10 million shortfall because of enrollments. Yet, we stand hopeful that recruiting efforts, the legislative process, and likely tuition hikes will, at some level, reduce those numbers. How much? We simply cannot say at this point. What we can safely say is that even if we are extraordinarily successful at recruiting new students, have a record fundraising grant writing year, make substantial gains in our legislative requests, and raise additional revenue through first and second tier tuition, we are still not likely to fully erase our $7 to $10 million gap. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to prepare ourselves now for the eventuality that once things come into at least a little clearer focus this spring, and we have a better sense for just how modest or large our gap is, that the revenue increase efforts I have been discussing will need to be accompanied by a number of cost reduction strategies. Thus, the hiring chill. We are asking all senior leaders to examine every open position because while we can probably fill it today, we must ask ourselves, is filling the position today as important as protecting existing positions and other things down the road when we will be looking for ongoing budget savings? In terms of some other principles to guide us as we face budget reductions, we should keep in mind that, as in previous times, some of these cuts will be identified centrally, others from within each division, and may range from everything from deferred maintenance to project cancellation to separation incentives to program right-sizing, and dozens of other things in between. In proceeding, we must work to maintain student access by keeping tuition raises to a minimum. We must also ask ourselves, are our spending priorities truly focused on our institutional mission, core themes, and administrative imperatives for our long-term strength and realization of our strategic vision? Are we safeguarding the quality of core academic and university experiences for students? Are we evaluating our programs and services for cost effectiveness and impact? Unlike years past, where we have asked you to do more with less, to take on more students and programs in the face of flat or decreasing budgets, the theme for the next few years will be doing less with less. This is still a difficult task, but if we will be disciplined about it, the challenge will perhaps not be as exhausting as the last few years of record growth that were outstripping our commensurate financial support. It should be noted that the anticipated reduction in enrollment over the next 2 years will undoubtedly impact academic programming. Schools and colleges need to carefully examine their course offerings, reducing their lower division offerings in light of projected enrollment declines, while maintaining a robust set of courses at the upper division to assist students to graduate in a timely manner. Unfortunately, the current reduction in freshman students will have an impact through the next few years, requiring a continual adjustment of course offerings at the lower and upper division as waves of students leave and return. In this environment, coupled with the current appetite in the legislature to tie funding to particular program development, we are likely headed into a very interesting phase where some schools and colleges may experience enrollment growth, requiring additional resources, while other schools and colleges may experience enrollment decline with accompanying resource contraction. In addition to these broad revenue-generating and cost-reducing principles and strategies I have discussed with you, I'm asking leaders across this campus to explore more ideas within their divisions. And I directly invite all who are listening today to engage directly with us in this conversation. Feel free to email my assistant, Kyle Reyes, with any recommendations you may have about increasing revenue or reducing costs. As I have in the past with all such requests, I'm committed to reading and considering every response that is submitted. Now, I recognize that all of this talk of the last few minutes can be a little unsettling. But the only thing that we could do, the only worst thing we could do right now is mask over the realities that we're facing. Well, there might be one thing worse, and that would be for everyone to walk out of here this afternoon assuming the very worst about their personal situation and the future of the school. The challenges before us, as I've said, are real and serious and will likely require some difficult decisions. We have to recognize that. That said, I am confident that we will navigate our way through this with the vast majority of you, and quite possibly every one of you, keeping your job. We will certainly do everything humanly possible to preserve the positions of those contributing members of the institution, looking to all other reasonable cost-saving measures first before reducing our productive personnel. I'm also most hopeful that in the midst of this challenge, we can find a way to make some progress on compensation. I can't promise that, but it is my earnest hope, and I think there's reason for optimism. You need to know, I have carefully read the data of the Great Colleges to Work For survey, and it only confirmed what I had already sensed. I know and understand the pain that so many of you are experiencing because each year your costs go up, but your paycheck does not. We do well to remind ourselves occasionally that at UVU, that despite our challenges, we do enjoy a certain sense of purpose and satisfaction in our work, as well as a degree of job security and a benefits package that are all pretty hard to match in the private sector. But these things do not always change the difficulties many of you face on a day-to-day basis just trying to make ends meet. My great hope and aim is that between some combination of legislative actions, tuition adjustment, we can find a way to at least make a partial progress on a broad multi-year project to improve our compensation situation, especially for those who have been here for a few years, proven yourselves, and yet still fall farther behind your peers. We must also keep right in the forefront of our minds that unlike previous budget reduction situations, we have much greater reason to expect the money flowing out now will come back in a relatively short horizon. Of course, it's impossible to predict precisely what post-mission patterns will develop related to higher education under these new arrangements. Some data suggests there's reason to believe rates of participation will noticeably increase, while other evidence and arguments suggest completions could decrease. In any case, unlike the big budget cuts of 2008, this is revenue loss that should mostly flow back to us in 2 to 3 years. So, even before we start down this rather cloudy path, there is a not too distant light ahead. And if we will step back for just a little while to gain some perspective, we will see that every year beyond that nearby beacon, the UVU star is destined to grow brighter and brighter. The next 8 years. The fact of the matter is that the fundamentals of UVU's long-range prospects have never been stronger. Demographics and economic cycles stand favorably in our future. As the truly remarkable dynamism of this community is just beginning to surface, we are now only beginning to see the flowering of remarkable private partnerships and public championing that will be the hallmark of this university in the years ahead. UVU has been on an upward trajectory in nearly every aspect of our university operations and reputation, and that is not going to slow anytime soon. To put this in perspective, I take you back to this stage just 2 years ago. At that time, I spoke about where UVU would be in a decade, the year 2020, targeting a head count of 46,000 students and an array of benchmarks to hit in order to maintain, if not improve, a number of our key quality and infrastructure indicators. To refresh your memory, on that day, I noted that by 2020, we would need to add 350 full-time faculty, 272 adjunct faculty, 47 advisors, 400 staff, and $45 million of additional tax funds, and 1.3 million square feet of space. At the time, there were some oohs and some skepticism about whether we could even come close to pulling that off. Yet consider where we are just 2 years later. Now, for starters, we have to acknowledge that the new missionary policy does change our headcount projections for 2020. Given the lag that will draw through the system with the new expanded cohorts of LDS missionaries leaving, we are now expecting to reach roughly 43,000 students by 2020 instead of 46,000. When you combine these new assumptions about growth and adjust quality targets accordingly, and then layer in the progress we have already made in the last 2 to 3 years, our remaining target in faculty hiring drops to, and this is again an 8-year horizon, 154. For adjunct hiring, it drops to 123. For advisors, it drops to 33. For staff, it drops to 191. For state tax funds, it drops to just over $25 million. Before, our targets were highly ambitious, but I thought still doable. Now, the targets remain high, but seem so much more within reach over the next 8 years. As for capital facilities and space needs, all you have to do is look around us. This could not be said of us in 2011, but we now proudly walk through a gleaming new science building with an inviting atrium and scores of smart classrooms and laboratories for some of the most cutting-edge teaching and student-focused research in the nation. The current project that keeps all the massive cranes busy is the construction of our new Student Life and Wellness building and adjoining 4-story parking structure. The parking structure is slated to be completed this August, with the doors expected to open for the student building in December. The Student Life and Wellness building will provide a wonderful university anchor for students on our traditionally commuter campus. Research tells us that students who have a greater affinity and connection to their campus environment are more likely to persist towards graduation. In that spirit, this structure has been designed to serve the body, mind, and spirit of our students. In a series of specially and neatly designed spaces, students will be able to exercise, recreate, socialize, study, take select courses, get counseling and support, and quietly meditate, pray, or reflect as they will. For a modest fee, faculty will have access to all of these same amenities. Right next door will stand a new 4-story parking structure. And while this will not solve all parking issues on campus, it will dramatically expand options for parking in the heart of campus, the one issue I know you all truly care about. On January 10th, we broke ground for the construction of a new We Care facility. This facility, made possible by the generous $2 million contribution of Barbara Barrington Jones and smaller donations from many others, will replace our current operation, which has been the site of great service for children for a number of years under the tireless direction of Mary Ellen Larson and her excellent team. The new facility will allow UVU to serve 3 to 4 times more students at any given time, providing a real lifeline and tremendous completion tool for so many of our single parents and low-income students. While we have been required to keep this primarily as a student-focused operation, a portion of the faculty and staff, a portion of the facility may also be used by the faculty and staff paying market rate. We look forward to its grand opening this fall. Even with all this progress, it only makes a dent in our capital facilities needs. In recognition of this, the regents have ranked our legislative request for a classroom building first in need, along with Weber State Science Building. The governor also has our classroom building designated as a priority in his budget, an advantage we did not enjoy when the science building was secured. These things bode well, but the key is the legislature, where lots of compelling projects are competing. Just last week, I made a presentation to the Infrastructure and General Government Committee to encourage their support for funding a new 244,000 square foot classroom building, which, thanks to planning money last year, we almost have fully designed. If approved, we could break ground on this new facility as early as mid-April. The location would be on the northwest corner of the library and would include 3,000 additional classroom seats, with classes varying in size from 40 to 330, a 1,000-seat auditorium that can be divided into 3 smaller sections, 20 study areas, and over 200 new faculty and staff offices. As I clarified to the committee, even though we are currently experiencing an enrollment pause, we needed this building yesterday. And if we started it today, it will be ready just in time for all those departing students to come back. I will be working every single week of the legislature to highlight this as the priority it must be this year. Another project currently underway is the initial development of the 100 acres of Geneva property we were able to purchase at rock bottom rates last year thanks to a generous donation and a helpful community redevelopment project. Some have wondered and speculated about the long-term intentions for that land. I assure you there is no secret master plan. Our immediate aim is to move some of our intramural fields from this Orem campus to this site, giving us more flexibility here on our main footprint for anyone of a variety of needs. Other developments on the Geneva site will come along as need and ability arise, and they will. Here I just remind everyone that Wilson Sorensen was something of a laughingstock in many quarters for insisting back in the 1970s that a very small technical college in Provo needed 200 acres of land on an old gravel pit in Orem for expansion purposes. Now look at us. We're bursting at the seams. Candidly, if we could find a way to pick up another 100 acres at Geneva at those same rock bottom prices, we should do it. In addition to these current facilities projects under development, we are regularly exploring opportunities for expansion at other locations. The property we own at Thanksgiving Point remains a prime option for satellite services in the heart of Silicon Slopes, one of the most dynamic, tech-oriented business corridors in the country right now. With the Front Runner train making a stop right on that property, our Geneva property, and across the street, it could easily become a convenient, well-integrated, popular outlet for the increasing pressure we are feeling on this campus. We're also heavily engaged in fundraising for 2 other discipline-specific buildings. One is a new arts facility that would provide much-needed space for students and faculty in our School of the Arts. Right now, we have students conducting vocal and instrumental rehearsal next to our auto body shop. As you might imagine, the setup is less than ideal when it comes to an appropriate learning environment for our talented artists. As a result, this project currently sits behind the classroom building as our next highest capital facilities priority. After that, we are also looking to expand our business building. In conjunction with a new campus front of the university, you can see that such a build-out and renovation would provide the front face of UVU with a new look and feel fitting to the serious university that we are. The expansion will also provide a first-rate learning experience for the largest business school in the state of Utah, the Woodbury School of Business. Do I think we will get all of these projects done in the next 8 years? Probably not, but do I think we will get most of them? Absolutely. Of course, even if we did, we would still fall short of our projected capital facility needs. The state and donors are not going to be able to build buildings fast enough for us. Thus, we must supplement this ambitious capital facilities build-out with an ambitious, if controlled, build-out of our technology-assisted learning environment. Since 2011, we have actively expanded our online educational delivery in terms of volume, options, and sophistication. Just this year, we moved to over 20% of our fall FTE delivered via technology-based courses. It won't be too long before we hit 25%, given the increasing student demand and the physical demands on our existing facilities. As I've said before, we exist primarily for the on-campus, in-the-classroom experience. To the extent technology can help us achieve that goal with efficiency and on the scale we are facing, we must embrace it accordingly. Much more could be said about this and perhaps will at a later time. Well, I could go on, detailing the dramatic rise of new donor connections and alumni touch points. We could consider the steady rise in our retention numbers over the last 6 years, thanks to our dedicated faculty everywhere and our wonderfully effective student success and retention initiative. We could discuss at some length our athletic programs and its rather sudden leap to national recognition on a variety of fronts, now sitting in a regionally stable, high-profile conference with chances, even good chances, to compete in postseason NCAA play, including the big dance. You heard it here first. We could speak of the academic master planning process getting underway and what that will mean for strengthening our core of programs and expansion of new ones all across our diverse mission, from new community college offerings to stellar four-year degrees to a smattering of high-demand master's degrees. Does all this still seem too pie in the sky? If so, just take a moment and step back with me now, not just 2 years, but 8 years. If you're skeptical about what we can do in the next 8 years, consider what we've done in the last 8 years. 8 years ago, our library was a tiny operation in the Losi Center with no student success function. We had just barely cut the ribbon on our liberal arts building. We had no business resource center. The education building was just beginning its remodel. We had a head count of less than 24,000 students. We had 35 bachelor's degrees as opposed to the 65 we now have. And we were just coming out from under a new bachelor's degree moratorium. We had no master's degrees. We had under 350 full-time faculty compared to the more than 550 we have today. We were in the midst of a major software program to overhaul Banner. Our operating budget hovered around $90 million compared to the $160 million budget we have today. We did not have any outside restaurants in the food court. We were not in any athletic conference, had no track, and had just begun construction on a new baseball stadium. And our academic dialogue featured the likes that year of Michael Moore and Sean Hannity. If I can, let me go off script here just to wrap up. What all of this misses is the thing that's hardest to show. It's easy to show schemes of buildings and plans for programs and lists of accomplishments. And those things are wonderful. And I hope you catch the spirit of what I'm saying, that this is an exciting time to be part of Utah Valley University. Whatever we're facing in the short term, it's an exciting time to be at one of the most dynamic, high-octane institutions of higher education that I know anywhere. But beyond all the evidence that's so easy to marshal in PowerPoint or maybe on the written page, it's easy to miss what we're really about at the end of the day. And it's about our individual students. There's no way I can even come close to paying tribute to what we have done as an institution the last 8 years for individuals. In similar fashion, there's no way I can begin to capture what we will do the next 8 years for individual after individual after individual. Perhaps as a way that's just illustrative of all of those folks that we might mention. Let me read a passage from a letter I received from someone this year, someone who was here during the last 8 years as a student, and someone who's here for, I hope, the next 8 years as a wonderful employee. Dear President Holland, thank you for the challenge you made to donors at the Scholarship Ball. I'll be honest and say that I look forward to good food, entertainment, and company at the ball, but I never walk in expecting to be moved. The frankness of your words, your commitment to serve those students most disadvantaged hit me most powerfully. I think you know some of my background, but it is something that I sometimes myself forget. Certainly it is not often present with me. That night, though, I reflected on the long-forgotten scenes from my past. My mother, literally selling the bed she slept on to keep the lights on for one more month, or making ketchup soup to put food on the table just one more day. Thanks to her sacrifice and the opportunities offered to me by then UVSC, I was able to pull myself out of the deepest poverty Despite the challenges and disappointments, I enjoy a sublime path compared to the life I knew growing up. I love this institution. Thank you for reminding me why and how deep my commitment does and should run. This is a young man who got himself out of poverty, got himself into Utah Valley State College, and got himself off to Harvard University for an advanced graduate degree, and who now comes and works for us. There are stories after stories after stories just like this one because of what we're doing here, day in and day out. That's the magic of Utah Valley University. That's why I want to be here, whatever we're facing in the next couple of years. Some of you may make different decisions. That's fine. Everyone has to take what path is right for them. But I will say for me, and I hope for many of you, that you'll choose to stick with UVU. You'll choose to stick out the next couple of years and to help us achieve that vision of the next 8 years with all of that building, with all of that excitement, with all of that programmatic accomplishment, but especially with the way that we will change the lives of individual students. Earlier, I made reference to the Great Colleges to Work For survey, and I said how deeply troubled I was, not surprised, but how heavy it weighs on me to see the strength of the challenge that many of you are facing financially. Something we've known, something we're working on, we have been working on, and we'll work on even harder. But what moved me so deeply was that at the same time that so many of you marked the challenges that you're feeling financially and in a way lower than many of your peers, many of your colleagues, but the number one assessment on that survey was that the employees of Utah Valley University are proud to work here. Your pride in this institution outscored not just your peers, but it outscored the Carnegie average. We're at the top of the heap in feeling pride in this institution. And it's got to be because of this. So please, join me as we move forward into the future, daunting as it may be in the short term, exciting as it may be in the long term, for the most wonderful, rewarding professional experience I think a group of people can possibly have. Thank you very much.